Assalamu alaikum. We will summarize some of the main points in this source from the lectures of prominent scholars. Today, we're going on a truly profound journey into the principles of tafsir, which is the scholarly interpretation of the Quran, and we're going to uncover the miraculous nature of this incredibly rich divine text. We're drawing on the timeless wisdom of some deeply respected scholars to understand not just how to read the words, but how to truly receive their message.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the miracle and preservation of the Quran. The scholars constantly remind us that this text is a literal divine miracle, a guiding light specifically sent to pull humanity out of darkness. But it begs a massive question. How exactly did it survive completely intact over so many centuries?
Well, Sheikh al-Sha'rawi has this truly fascinating explanation about the dual nature of how the Quran was preserved. You see, God preserved it through two simultaneous methods: memorization in the chests, meaning the hearts and minds of the believers, and physical recording in lines, meaning the actual written text. Al-Sha'rawi points out something really interesting here. Humans are naturally flawed, right? We often fail to perfectly apply divine laws in our everyday lives. If the preservation of this text had been left entirely as a burden on human discipline, there's a good chance it would have been lost or changed. But instead, God made its preservation a divine promise. He created a foolproof system where even those of us who might fall short in our actions are still fiercely protective of the exact wording of the text. This guarantees the divine system remains perfectly protected no matter what.
That brings us to Section 2, clearing the receiver via isti'adha. This is all about the spiritual preparation we need before we even begin interacting with the text.
Think about this for a second. Why do we seek refuge from Satan before we read the Quran? It actually seems a little counterintuitive, doesn't it? You'd probably think it makes more sense to seek refuge after you've read it, to somehow protect all that great knowledge you just absorbed. But no, the Quran explicitly commands us to seek refuge before we read a single word. So what's going on there?
Sheikh al-Sha'rawi answers this using a pretty brilliant metaphor. He breaks the process down into two parts, the actor and the receiver. In this scenario, the Quran is the actor. It's constantly projecting a flawless, incredibly powerful divine message. Your human heart, on the other hand, is the receiver. If your heart is full of static and interference caused by Satan's whispers, well, it just can't properly pick up the Quran's frequency. So seeking refuge before you read is literally tuning your receiver. You're clearing out all that static so the divine signal can come through perfectly clear.
To understand what that static really is, we have to look at how Satan attacks. The sources tell us he comes from 4 horizontal directions: the front, the back, the right, and the left. Basically, he tries to ambush us with worldly desires, fears about the future, or regrets from the past. But here is the amazing part. There are 2 directions he absolutely cannot access: above and below. Above represents your vertical connection to the majesty and divine authority of God. Below represents your humble, grounded submission as a believer. When you align yourself vertically, when you submit humbly to the highest authority, you literally step right out of Satan's horizontal crosshairs. He just can't touch you there.
Now that our receiver is cleared and tuned, we move to Section 3, the importance of contemplating verses. This is where we shift from just reading words on a page to actually digesting them.
There's this incredibly powerful verse the scholars highlight. Then do they not reflect upon the Quran, or are there locks upon their hearts? It is a stark warning. Reading without genuinely understanding or reflecting is basically the exact same as having a padlocked heart. And if your receiver is locked, it honestly doesn't matter how strong the divine signal is, the light simply can't get in.
And that brings us to an absolutely crucial concept called Tadabbur. Tadabbur is the deep, profound contemplation of the Qur'an's meanings. It isn't passive, it is a highly active, engaging process. There's a real consensus among scholars here. The primary goal of the Qur'an being revealed wasn't just so its words could sound beautiful when vocalized. The whole point was for its verses to be pondered, deeply understood, and then actually applied to our lives. Tadabbur is the bridge between just reading the text and actually living it.
Which naturally leads us to Section 4, the companion's methodology in learning. How do we practically apply this concept of Tadabbur? Let's look at the early generations who learned directly from the Prophet.
The early companions used a very rigorous, almost systematic 3-step learning process. Step 1, they would take just 10 verses at a time. Step 2, they dive into their deepest meanings, really trying to understand the context and the specific commands. And Step 3, they would actively apply that new knowledge to their daily lives. And here's the absolute game changer. They strictly refused to move on to the next 10 verses until they had completed all 3 of those steps. They fused knowledge and action together simultaneously.
To really put the sheer dedication of this method into perspective, just think about the number 8. It took the highly esteemed companion Ibn Omar 8 entire years to learn Surah al-Baqarah, which is the longest chapter in the Quran. Now that wasn't because he had a bad memory. Not at all. It was because he was meticulously running that exact 3-step method. He was deeply learning and physically implementing its profound laws, ethics, and meanings into his everyday reality before he ever allowed himself to move forward. Talk about commitment, right?
As you get deeper into studying tafsir, you might hit a bit of a roadblock, which brings us to Section 5, variation, not contradiction. It's a super common point of confusion when reading different scholarly interpretations.
The great scholar Ibn Taymiyyah lays down a golden rule here that helps clear this up. He distinguishes between two very different things: variation of expression and actual contradiction. A contradiction, meaning two things that mutually exclude each other, is completely unacceptable when we're talking about divine texts. But he points out that the vast majority of differences among early scholars in tafsir are just variations of expression. They aren't clashing with each other. It's more like they're looking at the exact same diamond, just from different angles. It enriches the overall meaning rather than breaking it.
Let me give you a quick example. Take the famous term, the straight path, or al-sirat al-mustaqim. If you open up different books of tafsir, you're going to see one scholar defining it as Islam. Another will say it's the Qur'an. A third might tell you it's the Prophet's Sunnah. So are they contradicting each other? No, absolutely not. This is a perfect example of variation of expression, because if you're following the Qur'an, you are following Islam, and you are on the Sunnah. Every single one of their definitions is perfectly correct, and they all point us to the exact same ultimate truth.
And that beautifully sets up our final segment, Section 6, the Quran's goal, guidance, and action. This is where we bring everything together into a practical takeaway.
At the end of the day, all these principles of tafsir we've talked about, from clearing the static in your spiritual receiver, to that deep tadabbur contemplation, to understanding how scholars vary in their expression, it all serves one single unified purpose. The Qur'an is not just a book meant to be recited on special occasions. It's a divine manual. It was quite literally designed to transform your character, to cure the psychological and spiritual diseases of the heart, and to actively guide every single one of your daily actions toward the straightest possible path.
So I want to leave you with this question, and I really want you to reflect on it. Will you keep reading the Quran merely as words on a page, leaving your receiver completely locked? Or are you ready to tune your heart, unlock those doors, and start using this incredibly powerful text as a true living manual for your life?
Assalamu alaikum.